Howdy folks, howdy. We're going to do a quick little walkthrough of how I actually determine the values for my gauges doing a PWM via a Microsquirt to actually drive my gauges. Right now the engine's off, it's up to temperature. So what we do here is we go to advanced engine and then go to our generic outputs. Right, and then this pulls up our actual generic outputs, our actual PWM curve here. Right, you got a few different parameters you can select. Obviously, enabling it on off, what pin you're enabling it on, and then the frequency which you want to actually PWM the gauge at. I seem to find that the higher frequencies generate a smoother gauge output. The lower frequencies can actually have the actual gauge needle pegging back and forth, which is kind of exciting and doesn't really do anything for you, doesn't give you a good indication. So you can see you set your axes here. So the load axis is the one that's going to actually control the gauge, and then our percent PWM over here is going to be what the output is. So what I did, instead of using the test mode, I just powered up the car so I could see everything, get the gauges going and everything. And then I actually went down here to the table and just modified the parameters. So the load down here at the bottom, I set this based on the values on the gauge. So my max value on my gauge is 260 degrees. I hope to God my engine never gets that hot, but we'll see. And then the lowest value of 7.5, which is actually below the minimum scale on my gauge, which in this case is 100 degrees. Then I took, and you can go to any parameter, right? You click the parameter, and then you can bump that up or down. In this case, we'll just go ahead and give it, we'll give it 10. And we can watch the gauge. I'll go ahead and hit 10 in here and focus on the gauge so you can watch that the gauge will actually change position once the actual input goes. Right, so see now how the gauge actually moved back. So now what I can do here is I can find out values that the actual gauge operates at, regardless of what specific value temperature is. I can just go through and go back and forth and find the correct value for what I need. So click undo, and you can see, boom, 36% PWM brings me up to about 160 degrees. Actually, I'm sorry, that's more like 170, which is actually a little bit off from what my gauge in Tuner Studio says I should be at. So it looks like I got to do a little bit of fine tuning here and bump that around a little bit back and forth to make something that's accurate. I'm not really wanting this to be hyper accurate. I just want it to be a ballpark indication so that as I'm driving the car, I can just glance down and go, yeah, it's about in band, or oh crap, I need to pull over and put coolant in it, or check it, or make sure the fan's working, yada yada yada. But I ended up generating this curve, which is a kind of gross approximation of what I need for my gauges. And then we can go through and we can look. The other gauge I have is my oil pressure gauge. You can see that is actually inverse of the curve, but I generated it the same way. I just modified an individual value back and forth until I saw a value that looked appropriate on my gauge cluster. Once I saw the appropriate value, I just went ahead and did that for several different values all the way along, and then plotted my actual temperatures across the bottom here, or my PWM values that I came up with as I modified the curve, and generated something that was approximately what I needed. So I hope this is helpful. If you guys need any more info, please feel free to hit me up. I'm more than happy to help.